Hey everyone, we know that you're here to help you sleep with the best scary stories. Get ready, take a deep breath, and relax. Comment below where you're watching from and at what time. This helps us improve our content to make it even better for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a terrifying tales. Story 1. When the rain opened a door to hell. Have you ever heard the rain whisper secrets? Tonight, Noah did. The wind howled outside as the storm intensified. It was the kind of night that begged you to stay inside, wrapped in a blanket, with a cup of tea and a good book, and that's exactly what Noah did. But this night was different. It was the kind of night that led him to a discovery he couldn't have prepared for. The house was old. The kind of house with creaking floors and long, winding corridors. Noah had just moved in and everything about it seemed strange. Even the air felt different, heavy, thick with history. The old attic was filled with forgotten things, dusty boxes, worn-out furniture, and old books that hadn't been touched in decades. Among them, one book stood out. It was weathered and worn, its pages yellowed with age. The cover was cracked, and the edges were frayed, but something about it called to him. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was something unsettling yet fascinating about the way it seemed to glow in the dim light of the attic. He couldn't resist. He grabbed it and hurried back downstairs. The storm outside raged as he opened the book, the sound of the rain growing louder with each turn of the page. The words shimmered on the page, almost as if they were alive, shifting and changing. Noah's heart raced as he read, drawn deeper into the mystery of the book. The storm outside seemed to mirror the unease growing inside him. The rain whispered through the cracks of the house. Noah. Noah, listen. Noah froze. The voice in his head wasn't his own. It wasn't coming from the house or from the book. It came from the storm itself, from the rain. A cold chill ran down his spine. Was it a trick of the mind? He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The wind outside howled louder, and the rain began to pound the windows like fists. The room felt colder. The book seemed to pulse in his hands, its pages turning faster as if it were urging him to continue. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. You shouldn't have opened it, Noah. The words echoed in his mind, sending a shiver through his entire body. He glanced around the room. Everything looked normal, yet there was an odd, suffocating feeling in the air, as if the house itself was closing in on him. The walls seemed to bend and stretch, warping in the dim light. He felt like he was losing his grip on reality. The rain whispered again, louder this time. The storm is inside you now, Noah. It's waiting. Noah's breath caught in his throat. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with something dark and ancient. He couldn't explain it, but he could feel it in his bones. There was something wrong with the house, something wrong with the book, and the storm outside. It wasn't just a storm. It was alive, it was aware, and it had found him. A loud thud broke his thoughts. He whipped around, his heart racing, but the room was empty. There was nothing there. But something wasn't right. The shadows in the corners of the room were darker now, deeper. They moved, twisting unnaturally. The floorboards creaked. The sound was no longer the normal groan of an old house. It was something else, something that made his skin crawl. Then, the sound of something scraping against the floor. It wasn't the wind this time. It was something else. Noah could hear it, feel it creeping closer. His pulse quickened, and he turned to look at the door. It was closed, but it shouldn't have been. He hadn't heard anyone come in, hadn't heard the sound of footsteps, but the door was definitely locked now. The rain continued its rhythmic pounding, louder than before. Noah's breath came in shallow gasps, the temperature dropping rapidly. As the air around him thickened, He could feel the weight of the house pressing down on him, suffocating him. The book pulsed again in his hands, its pages now glowing with a faint, eerie light. The storm. It's inside you now, Noah. You opened the door, and it won't let you leave. The voice was louder this time, more urgent. Noah couldn't ignore. The rain, the house, the shadows, it was all connected. And then the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, came from the hallway. Noah's heart stopped. They were coming for him. The floorboards creaked again, and this time it wasn't his imagination. Something was moving in the hallway, something that wasn't human. His mind raced as he backed toward the window, his hand gripping the book, so tightly his knuckles turned white. The rain, the wind, the shadows, they were all closing in on him. The door to the attic creaked open, and Noah's breath caught in his throat. The shadows were no longer just creeping in the corners. They were alive, reaching for him, twisting and stretching across the walls. And then, from the corner of the room, a shadow pulsed with the thunder. It moved across the walls like something out of a nightmare. It wasn't a man. It wasn't an animal. It was something else entirely. Dark, shapeless, but full of malice. Noah felt the presence of it behind him. He knew it was coming for him. The storm outside raged harder, the wind howling like a wild beast. The house groaned as if it were alive, as if it were fighting against him. The symbol in the book glowed brighter, pulsing with an energy Noah couldn't understand. The whispers in the rain grew louder, drowning out everything else. You can't run, Noah. It's too late. The floor shook beneath him, the walls closing in tighter, suffocating him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. The book was pulling him in, its power overwhelming, its pages whispering his name. And outside, the storm continued, relentless, as if it were waiting for something. Waiting for him. The shadow loomed larger now, stretching toward him, its edges sharp and dark. Noah backed away, but the wall behind him pressed against his back. He was trapped. The rain whispered once more. You can't escape it, Noah. Not now. Noah's hand shot out toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The walls were now alive. The house twisting and shifting like a living creature. The rain was everywhere now, inside, outside, all around him. And then for the first time, Noah realized the truth. He wasn't in control anymore. The storm was. The house was. And now, so was the book. Noah stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. The storm outside continued its relentless assault on the house, but inside the world had gone eerily silent. The whispers from the rain had stopped, leaving behind only the sound of his own breathing and the soft creaking of the floor beneath him. The shadow that pulsed with the thunder loomed larger now, its shape becoming more distinct with each passing second. It wasn't human, it wasn't animal, it was something else entirely. A mass of darkness that seemed to shift and twitch in the corner of his vision, as if it were alive. The cold air in the room thickened, stifling his breath. The book in his hands grew warmer, its pages turning on their own, almost as if it were feeding off his fear. The light from the dim bulb above flickered, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. He could feel it. Whatever this was, it was getting closer. You shouldn't have opened it, Noah. The voice was back, louder this time. It wasn't in his head. It was real. Coming from the rain, from the storm outside, from the shadows themselves. Noah's instincts screamed at him to run, to find the door. But something kept him rooted to the spot. Something in the air, in the weight of the house, in the very walls around him, held him in place. The shadows writhed and stretched, reaching for him, pulling him into their embrace. For the first time, Noah didn't feel alone. He felt watched, hunted. The house, the rain, the storm, they were all connected, all part of something larger. And he had stumbled into it. The shadow pulsed again, this time moving across the room with an unnatural speed. Noah's breath caught in his throat as he realized that it was heading directly toward him. His legs felt like they were made of stone, unwilling to move. The book in his hands trembled. The pages turned faster, the words on the pages now glowing with a soft, eerie light. The whispers came again, louder than ever, now indistinguishable from the sound of the storm. He could hear them in the walls, in the floorboards, in the very air around him. It's not too late to leave. Close the book, Noah. Noah's mind raced. He couldn't. The book had already opened a door, one he wasn't sure he could close. He had felt the storm enter him, felt its power seep into his soul. The book wasn't just a book. It was a gateway, and he had crossed into a world that didn't follow the same rules as his own. The shadow drew closer, its shape shifting, warping into something more terrifying by the second. It wasn't just darkness. It was something alive, something ancient, and it was coming for him. Noah's breath was shallow, his hands shaking as the book pulsed with an energy he couldn't control. The rain continued to pound the windows, louder now, the storm outside matching the fury building inside him. He had two choices. He could close the book and try to escape, or he could face whatever was waiting for him. But something deep inside him whispered, urging him to confront it. Stay and confront whatever is waiting for you. Noah swallowed hard, his eyes locked on the shadow now standing before him. He could feel its cold presence, like ice against his skin. His pulse raced, and for a moment he thought about running. But the house, the book, the storm, it was all connected. There was no escaping this. The shadow flickered, then solidified into something far worse than he could have imagined. It wasn't just darkness. It was a figure, a tall, gaunt shape, with elongated limbs that seemed to stretch beyond the bounds of reality. Its face was featureless, just a smooth expanse of blackness, but Noah could feel its eyes on him, piercing into his soul. The storm outside roared, a flash of lightning illuminating the room for a brief moment. And in that flash, Noah saw it. Something. On the figure's chest. A symbol. The same one he had seen in the book. The symbol, glowing faintly, as though it were alive. The whispers intensified, now louder than the storm. You've called it, Noah. It's here, and it's never leaving. The shadow stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. The air grew colder still, and Noah could feel the temperature drop. The floorboards beneath him creaked, groaned, and then split open with a loud crack. A rush of cold wind blasted through the room, knocking the book from his hands. Noah stumbled back, his legs nearly giving way beneath him. The shadow was inches from him now, its cold touch sending a shiver down his spine. The whispers were deafening, almost suffocating. You can't escape. Not now. The storm raged louder than ever, its intensity matching the fear that gripped Noah's heart. The house seemed to close in on him, the walls bending and twisting as if they were alive. He could hear the scratching of something in the distance, something that was getting closer. The shadow pulsed again, its form shifting and elongating, until it was nothing more than a dark mass, a black void consuming everything in its path. Noah's mind raced. What could he do? The book was still open on the floor, the pages fluttering in the wind. The symbol seemed to glow brighter, almost, beckoning him to return to it. Could it still help him? Or was it too late? The shadow lurched forward, its dark tendrils reaching for him. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, the rain pounding against the windows like 1,000 fists. The air was thick with fear, with the promise of something ancient and terrible. Noah had no choice. He had to face it. Whatever waited for him, whatever this thing was, he would not run. Not anymore. He stepped forward, his breath catching in his throat. The shadow's grip tightened around him. The whispers reached a fever pitch. "It's time, Noah. Time to embrace what you've called." The cold, heavy air seemed to press in on him. The room swirled with shadows and the figure grew larger, its dark hands reaching for him. The storm raged louder. The rain whispered his name once more. Noah's breath caught in his throat as the shadow's cold fingers brushed against his arm. The sensation was like ice, unnatural and horrifying. His body stiffened in fear, but his feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. The room spun around him, the air thick with a suffocating energy. He could hear the rain outside, louder, now thundering against the windows as if the world itself was closing in on him. The whispers, which had been faint at first, now surged through the air like a chorus. Each voice was indistinguishable from the next, a cacophony of strange languages that vibrated in his bones. It was more than a sound. It was a presence, an overwhelming force that pressed in from all sides. "You've awoken something ancient, Noah." The shadow in front of him moved, stretching impossibly tall, its form swirling and shifting in ways that defied reason. Its limbs seemed to twist and writhe like dark tendrils, a mass of darkness that no light could penetrate. The face, or lack of one, was a void, a swirling abyss that seemed to suck in everything around it. The symbol, glowing faintly on, its chest pulsed in time with Noah's racing heartbeat, casting an eerie light across the room. Noah's mind reeled. This wasn't just some nightmare. This was real. The creature standing in front of him wasn't just a figment of his imagination. It was something far worse, something tied to the rain, to the book, and to the house he had foolishly entered. The air grew colder, and the whispers intensified, filling the room, drowning out all other sounds. He could feel the cold seeping into his skin, chilling him to the bone. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream, but his body wouldn't obey. He was paralyzed with fear, unable to move as the creature's presence grew stronger. "You called us, Noah, and now you belong to us." The voice echoed in his mind, each word sending a shockwave through his chest. His pulse quickened as he looked down at the book still clutched in his hand. The pages were warm beneath his fingers, the words shifting in ways they shouldn't. He had no idea how it was happening, but he knew he needed to close the book. He had to stop it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ending whatever he had started when he opened that cursed book. The creature leaned in closer, its cold breath brushing against his face. Its tendrils moved like a serpent, curling around him, and he could feel the weight of its eyes, if it had eyes, locked on him. The air around him seemed to vibrate with a horrible energy, a dark hum that reverberated through his bones. "You cannot escape us, Noah. Not this time." The words were like a hammer, crashing into his skull. His head swam with confusion and he struggled to think clearly. He could hear the rain now, louder than ever, pounding against the walls like a living force. The storm outside had grown violent, the wind howling through the cracks in the house, making the entire structure groan and creak as if it were alive. Noah reached for the book with trembling hands, but the creature's tendrils tightened around him, pulling him closer to its shifting form. He could feel his pulse in his throat, his heart racing as if it would burst from his chest. The book's pages flickered, turning on their own as though it was trying to speak to him. Suddenly, the rain outside ceased. A silence fell over the house, and for a brief moment, everything was still. The shadows seemed to hold their breath, but it didn't last. The silence was shattered by the deafening crack of thunder, the sky splitting open with a flash of blinding white light. The creature flinched as if the storm itself had struck it. The storm is ours. It always has been. Noah didn't know what to believe anymore. The lines between reality and nightmare were blurring. The book, the creature, the storm, they were all tied together in some way he couldn't understand. And every instinct screamed at him to run, but the book was the key. The shadow pulsed again, its form distorting as it grew even larger. It was as if it was feeding off the storm's power, its shape warping with every flash of lightning. The walls trembled with the intensity of the storm, and Noah could feel the book's pull on him, its power threatening to overwhelm him. There is no escape, Noah. Not now, not ever. The voice was a whisper and a scream, filling his mind, drowning out all rational thought. His fingers were numb, but he still held on to the book, his only chance to end this nightmare. But what if it wasn't enough? What if closing the book wasn't the answer? The creature's form grew larger, more twisted. The tendrils reached out, curling toward Noah, and he could feel his body freezing with fear. He didn't know how much longer he could stand it. He had to make a choice. There was no more time. Suddenly, a thought struck him. The book wasn't just a way to open the curse. It could end it. He had to find the right page. He had to. A shadow pulsed with the thunder, and for a brief moment the room seemed to crack open. The creature's form flickered like a broken image on a television screen. The room swayed, and the floor beneath him felt like it was sinking. Die. Voices rose in a deafening crescendo, the sound so intense that it felt like his skull would split open. Find the answers, Noah, or face us forever. He had no choice. He had to open the book. He had to end this before it was too late. The page turned on its own, and Noah's eyes locked onto the words. End the curse, close the book. But there was no more time. The creature was already advancing, its form impossibly close now. Its claws reached out, grazing his arm with a chilling touch. The symbol glowed brighter, its pulse matching the thrum of his own heart. He knew what he had to do. He had to stay and confront whatever is waiting for you, or search for answers before it's too late. The storm outside had reached its peak. The wind screamed like a banshee, rattling the windows while the rain battered against the walls with a relentless fury. The house trembled, groaning under the pressure of the tempest, its timbers creaking and shifting. Inside, the air had grown cold and heavy, the temperature dropping by the second as if the very walls of the house were being pulled into another dimension. Noah stood in the center of the room, the book clutched tightly in his hands. The shadow before him had grown, its tendrils of darkness stretching out like fingers reaching for him. The figure pulsed with a dark energy, its outline flickering and shifting in the dim light, growing more menacing with every passing second. The creature's face was a blur, its features indistinct, but Noah could feel its cold, malevolent gaze on him. The symbol on the creature's chest burned with an unnatural glow, casting an eerie light that flickered across the walls. The rain outside had reached a deafening roar, its whispers louder than ever before, almost as if the storm itself was alive, its voice merging with the wind. The air was thick, oppressive, and Noah's heart raced in his chest. The rain whispered, "You have released us." The voice echoed in his mind, and for a moment he felt the weight of the curse pressing down on him. The storm outside had become a physical force pushing against him, as if the wind itself were trying to drag him away. Noah's body trembled, but his resolve hardened. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let this nightmare consume him. The creature before him, this shadow, this nightmare, wasn't just a figment of the storm. It was a part of the curse, a manifestation of everything that had been unleashed by the book. The creature's form twisted and flickered as if it were composed of shadows and rain itself, its body a dark amalgamation of the two. The book in Noah's hands pulsed in rhythm with the rain, its pages rustling as if alive, beckoning him. The whispers grew louder, demanding his surrender. Noah could hear the voices of those who had come before him, those who had opened the book, and been consumed by the storm. Their cries filled the air, their warnings lost in the howling wind. "Stay and face it," the whispers urged. Noah's breath hitched, his body frozen in place. The creature's tendrils reached out, and a chill like nothing he had ever felt before seeped into his bones. His teeth chattered, but he refused to move. Refused to give in. The rain whispered again, this time so loud it felt like the walls themselves were speaking. "You cannot escape. You are ours now." The creature's form was almost completely solid now, its shape clearer than ever. Its shadow pulsed with each crack of thunder that rumbled through the house, each wave of sound shaking Noah to his core. And then, for a moment, the creature stopped moving. It paused as if waiting for Noah to make a choice. Noah gripped the book tighter, the weight of it grounding him, and the words began to shift on the pages. He couldn't understand them at first, but they began to rearrange themselves, as if the book itself was revealing the truth. To break the curse, you must face the shadow. Only by confronting the storm can the darkness be undone. Noah's mind raced as he processed the words. This was it. The moment of truth. There was no running from this, no escaping. He had to face the shadow, the darkness that had been tied to the storm, tied to the book. He had to confront the very thing that had come to life because of his curiosity. The rain whispered again. "Fight, Noah. You have the power." Noah could feel it now. The energy of the book thrumming in his hands, a source of power that had been hidden all along. The storm had given him strength. It was up to him to use it. The creature hissed, its shadowy form writhing with an almost animalistic hunger. The air around them crackled with energy. Noah didn't wait. He raised the book high, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature recoiled as the book's energy flared, and the symbol on its chest burned brighter, pulsing with an almost blinding intensity. The wind howled. The rain lashed harder against the windows, but Noah stood firm. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside him. The book's power surged through him, filling him with a warmth that pushed back the cold fear threatening to take hold. "I am not afraid," Noah whispered under his breath, his voice steady despite the terror gripping his heart. The creature screeched, a sound like nails scraping against stone, but Noah didn't flinch. He focused on the book, on the power it contained, and he knew what he had to do. The storm itself seemed to bow to the book's power as the symbol glowed brighter than ever before, turning the room into a beacon of light. With one final push, Noah shouted, "Be gone!" The light from the book exploded outward, filling the room with a brilliant white-hot glow. The creature shrieked, its form breaking apart as the light engulfed it. The darkness that had threatened to consume him dissipated, breaking away like smoke in the wind. The storm outside raged on for a few more moments before slowly fading. The wind died down, and the rain softened, no longer the deafening roar it had once been. Noah stood in the center of the room, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. The book in his hands was still, its pages no longer shifting. The symbol on the cover had faded, no longer glowing with malevolent energy. It was over. The curse had been broken. But as Noah looked around, his gaze fell on the window, where the last remnants of the storm were receding. There, for just a moment, he swore he saw the faintest glimmer of the symbol reflected in the rain-soaked glass. Noah's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't over. Not completely. The rain whispered one last time. "We will return." Noah swallowed hard. He had won for now, but he knew that the storm and the darkness would always be waiting just beyond the horizon. Story 2. The Cursed Stone. The storm had grown more intense with each passing minute. The soft patter of rain on the window now felt like something more. A cold and unsettling whisper carried on the wind. The air was thick with tension, as if something was waiting to happen. Flight 473 was heading to the United States, and the mood was unusually quiet for a flight. The passengers were mostly engrossed in their own thoughts, unaware of the dark energy already aboard the plane. Ethan sat by the window, his gaze fixed on the turbulent clouds outside, a growing unease in his chest. The storm ahead felt different, unnatural. Beside him sat a man, a stranger dressed in long black robes. His features were hidden beneath a hood, but his eyes, dark, calculating, seemed to hold a secret. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He turned his attention back to the window, trying to dismiss the discomfort gnawing at him. Zephyr, the sorcerer seated beside Ethan, wasn't just any passenger. He was a man with a dark purpose. He had created the stone in his possession, an ancient and cursed relic, to harness forbidden power. Using dark rituals and ancient symbols, he had forged the stone in the heart of an unholy fire. The stone pulsed, faintly with an eerie energy, its black surface reflecting the dim lights of the cabin. The sorcerer had intended to keep it concealed, but the stone was restless. It had been calling to him for weeks, its pull growing stronger as they neared the United States. Zephyr had planned to meet with a secretive group of occultists in the city, but that wasn't the true reason for his journey. He had a deeper goal: to unlock the stone's full potential and control its power. He believed that with the stone, he could bend reality itself to his will. But there was a price. The stone was cursed, and once its power was unleashed, it couldn't be contained. The rain outside intensified. The wind howled, rattling the windows. Ethan's fingers tightened around the armrest as the turbulence grew more violent. It felt like the storm was fighting against them, the clouds pressing down like an oppressive force. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the plane was flying directly into the heart of something dark and powerful. The whispers of the rain grew louder, and Ethan could swear he heard voices in the gusting wind, faint and cold. He turned to Zephyr, but the sorcerer's attention was fixed on the stone. His grip tightened on the briefcase that contained it. The storm outside had become something far worse than just bad weather. The clouds were swirling in unnatural patterns, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. The passengers were starting to panic, unaware of the dark force that was about to break free. Then, with a deafening roar, the plane lurched violently, as if it had hit an invisible wall in the sky. The lights flickered and the seatbelt sign blinked erratically. The screams of passengers filled the air as the plane dropped, pitching forward in a terrifying descent. The stone inside Zephyr's briefcase pulsed. A dark energy surged through him, through the entire cabin. The air crackled with power, the temperature plummeting. The whispers of the rain had become a chorus of voices, a maddening hum that filled the plane. A shadow pulsed with the thunder. Zephyr thought, his heart pounding in his chest. The storm was alive, and it had awakened something dark. The plane shook violently again, this time with a force that felt like the end. The last thing Ethan saw before the world went dark was the storm outside, huge swirling clouds that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the lightning. And then, silence. Ethan woke in a daze, the ground beneath him hard and cold. His ears rang with the distant sound of voices and the clamor of emergency responders. His head ached, and his body felt heavy. As he slowly sat up, he realized the plane had crashed. The wreckage was scattered across a desolate stretch of land far from civilization. The rain had stopped, but something was different now. The air was thick with an oppressive feeling, and the remnants of the storm hung heavy in the sky. It was as though the world itself had been transformed. The trees around him seemed to loom with an unnatural presence, their branches twisting like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The whispers were still there, Ethan staggered to his feet, his breath shallow. The rain had stopped, but the world around him felt colder, darker. He could still hear the faint whispers in the air like a distant call urging him forward. He glanced around, hoping for a sign of rescue, but the wreckage of the plane was eerily silent. No one seemed to be moving. Then he remembered the briefcase, the stone. As if on cue, he felt a chill run down his spine. The stone was out there, somewhere. And whatever it was capable of, it had already started to spread its influence. The town of Hazelwood, just a few miles away, was about to experience something that had never been seen before. The stone's curse was just beginning, and the horrors that would follow could not be stopped. The cursed stone had fallen, and with it, an ancient power had been unleashed. Ethan didn't understand it yet, but the pieces were beginning to fall into place. As he walked deeper into the fog-covered streets, the smell of damp earth and decay filled the air. The rain whispered again, "Leave. Leave now." The sound of the rain outside seemed to merge with his thoughts, pulling at his mind like an invisible thread. It was as though something in the air had changed. Thick, suffocating, almost alive. Every step Ethan took felt like a tug-of-war between his own curiosity and an instinctive warning to turn back. He tightened his grip on the map he had stolen from the wreckage of the plane. It was all he had left of his journey, a final clue to the mystery that had brought him here. The stone had been cursed by the old sorcerer, and its purpose was becoming clearer now. It wasn't just a stone. It was an instrument of fear, a tool to warp reality itself. The curse was alive, feeding off the dread that hung over Hazelwood. The walls seemed to whisper as he walked past crumbling houses. "Leave. Leave." The words didn't come from the rain this time. They came from the very town, a chilling symphony of warnings. The shadows around him twisted unnaturally, pulsing like something was watching him from just out of sight. The town was awake now, its curse spreading, and Ethan was right in the middle of it. As he passed the church at the end of the street, he felt something pulling him in. The door creaked open on its own, and the faint echo of footsteps sounded from inside as though someone or something was waiting for him. He hesitated for a moment but then stepped inside, his heart racing. The air inside was thick with dust, and the dim light from the broken stained glass windows cast long shadows along the stone walls. It felt like time had stopped in this place, as though it had been abandoned long ago. But was it really abandoned? The wind howled outside, rattling the old church. Ethan moved forward cautiously, his footsteps creaking on the wooden floor, and then, in the far corner, he saw her. A woman stood there, dressed in a faded yellow dress. Her hair was tangled and matted against her face, her eyes black as coal. Her stare was fixed on him, and her voice broke the silence. "The stone," she whispered. "You must destroy it before it consumes you." Ethan's heart thudded painfully in his chest. Who was this woman? Why was she warning him? Was she part of the curse? The shadows seemed to pulse with the thunder, growing darker and longer. A deep rumbling filled the church, vibrating through the walls. Ethan took a step forward, but the woman didn't move. Her eyes held his gaze unwavering. "You don't understand," she continued, her voice a hoarse whisper. "The stone. It's not just a stone. It is the heart of this town's curse. It feeds off fear. The more fear it consumes, the stronger it grows. And you are its next victim." Ethan's mind raced. The stone had fallen from the sky, and now it was here, feeding on everything around it. Was this why the town felt so wrong? Why the shadows moved of their own accord? Why the whispers grew louder the further he ventured into Hazelwood? He didn't have time to think. The rain whispered again, this time more insistent. "Leave. Leave before it's too late." But Ethan knew deep down he couldn't leave. The stone had chosen him. The curse was already inside him, clawing at his mind, feeding off his fear. If he ran now, it would only follow. There was only one choice left. He had to confront it. But how? Where? He looked at the woman, desperate for an answer, but she was gone. The shadows had swallowed her up, leaving nothing but a lingering chill in the air. The thunder cracked outside. Ethan stepped forward, the ground beneath him trembling. There was no turning back now. A choice lay before him. Ethan stood in the cold, damp church, his breath visible in the air as he debated his next move. The rain whispered around him, urging him to leave, to run far away from the cursed stone and the horrors it had unleashed. But the fear gnawing at him told a different story. There was something bigger at play here, something that had chosen him to confront it. The whispers were growing louder now, not just from the rain, but from the very walls, the floorboards, the air itself. You can't escape. You can't outrun it, they murmured. Ethan clenched his fists, fighting the overwhelming urge to flee. The shadows in the church seemed to sway in the dim light, moving with a life of their own. The thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the building's foundations. A shadow pulsed with the thunder, stretching long and dark, reaching out towards Ethan. He could feel it, something ancient and malevolent, pulling at him from every corner of the room. Suddenly the air shifted. The temperature dropped even further, and a cold mist began to seep through the cracks in the walls. The rain outside intensified, now a heavy downpour. The thunder cracked so loudly that it felt like the heavens themselves were tearing apart. Ethan took a deep breath, and with a final glance around the church, he stepped forward into the unknown. He couldn't turn back now. The town of Hazelwood was alive with the curse, and it was waiting for him to confront it. The moment his foot hit the ground outside the church, the ground beneath him shook. The earth seemed to groan, as if it were awakening after a long slumber. The fog thickened, wrapping around his legs like cold fingers. Every step he took seemed to echo through the town, disturbing the silence that had settled over it. The rain continued to whisper, its voice almost pleading now. Leave. Leave while you can. But Ethan kept walking. The map was clenched tightly in his hand, the only thing he had left to guide him. It was marked with strange symbols, the ones he had seen in the church before the woman vanished. The path was clear now. He had to follow it. The stone was waiting for him. As he walked deeper into the fog, the world around him seemed to distort. The buildings appeared and vanished in flashes, like fleeting images in a nightmare. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows in the streets began to take shape. Figures, moving in the darkness, watching him. He felt eyes on him, cold, empty eyes lurking just beyond his vision. He quickened his pace, fear rising in his chest. The stone wasn't just an object, it was alive. It was a force, and it was connected to this cursed town, to everything that had gone wrong since the plane crash. He passed by an abandoned store, its windows shattered, its door hanging off its hinges. As he glanced inside, something shifted in the corner of his eye. A figure, cloaked in darkness, stood just out of sight. Ethan's heart raced, but he couldn't stop now. He couldn't afford to look back. The path led him to an old cemetery on the edge of town, the graves overgrown with weeds and the air thick with the scent of decay. The map pointed to the stone's location here, deep within the cemetery. His pulse quickened and a sense of dread washed over him. The rain whispered again. It's too late, it's already here. Ethan swallowed hard. He was close now, so close he could almost feel the stone's presence. The curse was growing stronger, and he was running out of time. There was no turning back. He had to face it. As he stepped between the gravestones, the shadows seemed to close in around him, the figures watching him from every direction. The wind howled, and the rain turned to a violent downpour. In the distance, Ethan could see it. An old mausoleum, its door ajar, the stone glowing faintly from within. He hesitated for a moment. Was this it? Was this where it all ended? With a final breath, Ethan stepped toward the mausoleum. The door creaked open with an eerie groan, the darkness inside swallowing him whole. The air inside was thick and oppressive, like the weight of the curse itself was pressing down on him. His heart pounded in his chest and his breath quickened. He had no idea what awaited him, but one thing was clear. He had come too far to stop now. And then, as he stepped further into the darkness, he felt it. A cold, unseen presence behind him, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The stone was close. He turned the corner and saw it, sitting on a pedestal in the center of the room, glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. The cursed stone. It was smaller than he had imagined, but its power was unmistakable. The stone pulsed, with an energy he could feel deep in his bones. Ethan's heart raced. He knew what he had to do. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they neared the stone. The rain whispered one final time, its voice desperate. "Don't touch it." But it was too late. The cursed stone pulsed in the darkness, its faint glow casting eerie shadows across the mausoleum walls. Ethan could feel the power radiating from it, a force so ancient and malevolent that it seemed to choke the air itself. He stood at the center of the crypt, heart pounding as the whispers of the curse filled his ears. The town of Hazelwood was no longer just a place. It had become part of the stone's curse, alive with darkness. "The stone is not just an object," a voice echoed from the shadows, cold and distant. "It is a prison, and you, Ethan, are its warden." Ethan spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was nothing but the oppressive darkness pressing in from every side. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decay, and something more, something metallic like blood. The rain whispered outside, a constant hum. "Leave now. Leave before it consumes you." His breath quickened. The voice from the rain. It had never been this loud before. It was as if the town itself was trying to warn him, to beg him to stop. But Ethan couldn't. Not now. He reached out, trembling, and his fingers brushed against the cursed stone. The moment they touched it, a violent surge of energy coursed through his body, sending a jolt through every fiber of his being. The stone seemed to resist, pulling him closer, as though trying to absorb him. The walls of the mausoleum seemed to groan and shift, the darkness swirling like a living entity. Shadows danced on the stone floor, creeping closer to him. The curse had awoken fully now, and it was stronger than ever. It wasn't just a force, it was a living thing. Suddenly, a figure materialized before him, a woman from the fog. Her tattered yellow dress fluttered in the non-existent breeze. Her black eyes locked onto Ethan's, her mouth moving, but no sound came out. Her expression was full of desperation. "The stone," she whispered, her voice a mere breath against the howling wind. "You must destroy it before it consumes you. It's too late for me, but not for you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Who was she? Why was she here? And why was she warning him? A shadow pulsed with the thunder, growing darker, more menacing. Ethan backed away, his mind racing. The woman was gone, but her words stayed with him. "Destroy the stone before it consumes you." The whispers from the rain grew louder again. "Destroy it. You must destroy it." He turned back to the stone, the cursed relic that had started this all. There was no more time to hesitate. The woman had spoken the truth. The stone wasn't just an object of dark power. It was alive. It had been waiting for someone like him to come along, to feed off his fear, to break him. And it had almost succeeded. With a breath, Ethan grabbed the stone, feeling its cold surface burn against his palm. The air around him seemed to warp, the room tilting as if the very fabric of reality was bending. The shadows crept closer, their voices rising in a cacophony of agony and fear. Ethan's fingers tightened around the stone as he raised it high. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The whispers of the rain, the pounding of his heart, the sound of his breath, all merged into one, a single heartbeat in a universe of darkness. He hurled the stone to the ground with all his might. The impact was deafening. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the stone, illuminating the entire mausoleum. The shadows screamed, their forms flickering as the curse's power began to unravel. The walls cracked and the ground trembled beneath his feet. Ethan could feel the stone's energy trying to pull him in, trying to stop him, but it was too late. The stone shattered. The power of the curse was released in a final, devastating wave. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The walls of the mausoleum stopped shifting, the air cleared, and the shadows retreated into nothingness. The oppressive weight that had hung over Hazelwood lifted, leaving a strange, almost peaceful quiet in its wake. Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body exhausted from the effort. The stone was no more, its fragments scattered across the floor like dust. The curse was broken. But the cost was high. As he stood, he looked around the mausoleum. The air felt different now, lighter almost. The whispers had stopped, and the oppressive weight that had once clung to Hazelwood was gone. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The silence was too perfect. He turned to leave. But as he did, a faint whisper reached his ears once more. The stone may be gone, but the curse is not finished. He spun around, but there was no one there. Just the empty mausoleum, the remnants of the shattered stone, and the silence of a town that had been forever changed. Ethan stepped outside into the cold night. The rain had stopped and the fog was beginning to lift. The town of Hazelwood was still standing, but it felt different. It felt awake. He walked away, knowing that while the curse had been broken, Hazelwood would never be the same again. The stone was gone, but its shadow would linger forever. The town was free for now, but he knew better than to think it was truly over. Story number 3, Cursed Tree Park. Have you ever heard the rain whisper secrets? Zoe did, right before the children vanished. The sky turned gray. Heavy clouds crawled across the park. The wind was soft at first, then it grew cold. 4 families had come, together. A picnic in the quiet woods. 12 kids all running free. They chose a spot near the edge, where the trees grew older, twisted branches, dark trunks. Still, the parents laughed and unpacked. "Stay close," Ethan's mom shouted. The kids nodded, but they had other plans. Zoe led the group toward the deeper path. Ethan, Michael, Ivy, and others followed. No one noticed the broken sign. Trail, closed. Danger. The kids stepped past it. Leaves crunched under their feet. The forest pulled them in. It smelled like wet bark and moss. The kind of smell you remember. Not good, not bad, just deep. "The trees look weird here," Ivy said. "They're older," said Michael. "Cooler," Zoe added. A drop of rain hit her cheek, then another. The rain whispered. It sounded like soft breathing between branches. They laughed and ran deeper. Shoes slapping the mud, voices echoing under the canopy. The path twisted left, then right. Thorns scratched their arms. The air grew colder. Zoe reached out to touch a vine. "Don't," Ivy warned. It moved. Zoe smiled. "It's just the wind." But there was no wind now, only the sound of distant thunder. They reached a clearing. In the center stood a giant black tree. Its bark was cracked like old skin. Its roots spread wide, like claws. "Let's take a photo," Zoe said. She climbed on a root, smiling. The others followed. Ivy stayed back. The tree made her chest feel heavy, like it was watching. Lightning flashed above them. Then, boom! A shadow pulsed with the thunder. It wasn't just dark. It moved. It had shape and breath. Zoe looked up. The bark beside her cracked. Slowly. Something inside shifted. "Ivy," she whispered. "I think it's alive." The ground trembled. Mud bubbled under the roots. From inside the tree, a hollow sound grew, like a heartbeat made of wood. The rain whispered, "Leave the roots." Ethan slipped, trying to run. His hand touched a glowing symbol, a circle with 3 sharp lines. Suddenly a light exploded from the bark, and Michael vanished. No scream, no trace. He was gone. The kids screamed. They turned to run, but the forest changed. The trail was gone, replaced by endless trees. Branches crossed above them. Roots curled around their ankles. "Back this way," Ivy shouted. They pushed through vines, but each turn looked the same. Zoe clutched Ivy's hand. "I didn't mean to touch it." "It's okay," Ivy said, but her voice shook. More thunder rolled. Then silence. Even the birds were gone. They found a hollow tree, big enough to crawl inside. It smelled like smoke and rain. Inside, the walls were covered in carvings. Symbols glowed faint blue. One looked like the mark on Ethan's hand. Another was shaped like a teardrop. It pulsed. "What is this place?" he asked. Ivy leaned close. The rain whispered again. "One must return." The carvings moved slightly, shapes forming words. Old words, not English. But Ivy understood. She saw her name, then Zoe's, then Michael's, scratched out. They ran again. This time, slower. The fog had thickened. Their feet sank in mud. Zoe tripped, fell face first into a puddle. She came up coughing. "It's not water," she said. Her hands were black. The puddle smelled like burnt leaves, like something had died there. Ethan pointed. "Look." A light blinked between the trees, like a lantern swinging. They followed, it step by step, until the light stopped. Inside a small wooden cabin, the cabin looked abandoned, half covered in ivy. Its door hung crooked. "I'm not going in," Zoe said. But Ethan opened the door. Creak. Inside was dry. Dust floated like snow. Old chairs, a broken fireplace, a book sat on the table. Leather cover. Soaked but readable. Ivy opened it. Pages, filled with names, drawings of trees. One page had the black tree. Below it, "The first touched never return." Thunderclap shook the cabin. The door slammed shut. The walls pulsed. Whispers filled the air. "Stay. Stay." Ethan dropped the book. "Let's go." They opened the back door. Fog rushed in. Zoe screamed. Outside was not the same forest. The trees were closer, too close. Some had faces now. Hollow eyes, grinning mouths, all carved and moving. A branch reached for Ivy. She ducked, grabbed Zoe's arm. They ran again. No path, just panic. Then, rain. Louder. This time, the rain whispered, "Return what was taken." "What did we take?" Zoe cried. Ivy stopped running. "The flower. You picked a purple flower." Zoe reached into her pocket. Still there. Still glowing. She dropped it. The moment it hit the mud, the forest screamed. All at once, leaves tore from branches, roots cracked. The trees groaned. The wind roared. But then, silence. The fog began to lift. The trees opened slightly. Just enough. A path appeared. "Go," Ivy shouted. They ran, not stopping, not thinking. They broke through the tree line, back to the picnic spot. The families were still there, laughing, eating sandwiches. Time hadn't moved. Zoe dropped to her knees, breathing hard. Ethan looked at his hand. The mark was gone, but Ivy's hand still glowed faint blue. She didn't speak. She just looked back, toward the woods. The trees were quiet now, still, watching. That night, at home, rain tapped her window. Ivy couldn't sleep. She drew the symbol again, and again, each time it changed. Then, the rain whispered outside, "You left, but not all of you." When the path disappeared, the kids froze. Zoe's heart raced as she looked around. The trees were too close, their twisted trunks bending in unnatural ways, like they were leaning in to watch. The air felt thick, as though the forest itself was alive, holding its breath. They had no way out now. Zoe could feel the weight of every step they took. The ground felt soft and unstable, like it might swallow them whole at any moment. And the trees, they were watching. Their gnarled branches reached out as if trying to trap them in this nightmare of endless woods. Zoe's eyes darted nervously, searching for some sign of the trail they had followed. But it was gone. The path had disappeared without a trace. Where did the trail go? Ivy whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked around, as if expecting to find the way back. But there was nothing. Just trees. Thick, ancient trees that seemed to close in on them. Zoe clenched her fists. "We have to get out of here. This place, it's wrong." But the forest had other plans. No matter which direction they turned, they found themselves surrounded by the same twisted trees, the same tangled roots. The path was gone, swallowed by the forest, and there was no way to go back. Then came the whispers. At first, Zoe thought it was just the wind, but the sound was different. It wasn't the usual rustling of leaves or the soft murmur of the breeze. It was something else, something darker. The wind had a voice now, a voice that seemed to come from all around them. The rain whispered. Ethan muttered, his eyes scanning the trees nervously. His hand was clenched tightly around Zoe's. "I heard it before, it's following us." Zoe shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The rain had stopped, but the air was colder now, and the silence felt heavier. The ground beneath them seemed to shift, as if it was alive, moving with them. Roots rose from the earth and wrapped around their ankles, as though the trees themselves were trying to drag them deeper into the forest. "I don't like this," Michael said, his voice tight with fear. "We need to get out now." Zoe nodded, her mind racing. "We need to find the way out. Where's the path?" But there was no path. Only trees. Only shadows. Suddenly, a shadow pulsed with the thunder above them. It wasn't just a shadow. It moved. It breathed. It was alive. Zoe's heart skipped a beat. "What was that?" "I think we're being watched," she whispered. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The trees were moving, shifting in ways that didn't make sense. They were closing in. The air was thick with something unspoken, something dark. Ivy turned slowly, her face pale. "Look," she said quietly, pointing to a tree just ahead of them. It's the mark." Zoe squinted, and her stomach dropped. A symbol was carved into the bark of the tree. It was the same one she had seen earlier back in the hollow tree. An eerie glowing symbol that seemed to pulse with an unnatural light. It was the same mark that had been on the book they found in the cabin. "I don't like this," Zoe whispered. "It's the same mark. But what does it mean?" Before anyone could answer, the ground shook beneath them. The trees groaned, their trunks creaking as if they were alive. From deep within the forest there was a sound, something stirring. Zoe's heart raced. She turned to the others, but before she could speak, the tree nearest to her cracked. Its bark split with a sound that echoed through the woods like bones breaking. And then from the crack in the tree something moved. A shape. A figure. A shadow pulsed with the thunder, and Zoe gasped. The figure was not human. It wasn't even an animal. It was something else. Something from the depths of the forest. I think we need to leave. Now, Ivy said urgently, pulling at Zoe's sleeve. But it was too late. The figure was moving toward them, its form shifting and changing. With each flash of lightning, "Ivy," Zoe whispered, her voice trembling. "What is that thing?" "I don't know," Ivy replied, her voice low. "But I don't want to find out." The figure crept closer, its dark shape flickering in and out of sight. The trees around them seemed to come alive, their branches reaching for the children, as though they were trying to trap them. Before anyone could react, Michael disappeared. One moment he was there, standing next to Zoe, and the next, he was gone. There was no scream, no warning. Just a sudden, eerie silence. Zoe screamed. "Michael, where did he go?" They turned in a panic, searching for any sign of him, but there was nothing. Michael had vanished into thin air. "Michael!" Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. "Where are you?" But there was no answer. Just the sound of the wind, the sound of the trees groaning, and the sound of the rain whispering. "Leave this place." The whispers grew louder. Zoe's eyes were wide with terror. What's happening? Why did Michael disappear? "I don't know," Ivy said, her voice trembling. "But we need to get out of here now." But the forest wouldn't let them go. The trees were closing in. The path was gone. And every turn led them back to the same twisted, dark woods. No matter how hard they tried to escape, they were trapped. "Where's the exit?" Ethan cried. "We're never going to get out." But then something caught Zoe's eye. A light. A small flicker in the distance, like a lantern swinging in the wind. It blinked in the darkness, casting a faint glow. "Look," Zoe said, pointing toward the light. "That way." They ran toward it, their feet slipping in the mud. The air was thick with fog, and the light seemed to grow brighter with each step. When they reached the source of the light, they found an old wooden cabin. It was half covered in ivy, its door hanging crookedly on its hinges. The cabin looked abandoned, but it was their only option. They had to go inside. "I'm not sure about this," Zoe said, her voice filled with doubt. But Ethan had already opened the door. It creaked on its hinges, the sound sending a chill through Zoe's spine. The air inside was dry but musty, and dust floated in the air like snowflakes. Old furniture sat covered in layers of dust. A broken fireplace stood in the corner, and a leather-bound book lay open on a table. "What's this?" Ivy asked, picking up the book. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with names and drawings of trees. One page in particular caught Zoe's eye. It showed the black tree, the one they had seen earlier in the forest. Below the tree was a single line of text. "The first to touch never return." Zoe's stomach twisted. "What does this mean?" Before anyone could answer, a thunderclap shook the cabin. The walls seemed to pulse, as though the very structure of the building was alive. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the whispers returned, louder than ever. "Stay. Stay. Let's go!" Ethan shouted, his voice filled with panic. He grabbed the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Zoe turned to the others, her heart racing. "We have to leave. Now." They ran to the back door and flung it open. The fog poured in, thick and suffocating. Zoe screamed when she saw what was outside. The forest had changed. The trees were closer now, too close, their branches stretched out like arms reaching for them. Some of the trees had faces, hollow eyes carved into their trunks, grinning mouths that moved and whispered in the wind. It was like the forest had come to life. We have to run, Zoe screamed. A branch reached out, wrapping around Ivy's leg. She screamed, but Zoe grabbed her arm and pulled her free. They ran as fast as they could, but there was no path. There was no escape. Then the rain came. The whispers grew louder. The rain whispered, "Return what was taken." Zoe stopped, gasping for breath. "What did we take?" Ivy turned to her. "The flower. You picked a purple flower." Zoe's hand flew to her pocket. She pulled out the glowing flower. It was still glowing, still pulsing with that strange light. Without thinking, Zoe dropped the flower into the mud. The moment it hit the ground, the forest screamed. The trees shook. The branches twisted and writhed. The ground cracked open, and the air grew heavy, almost suffocating. The whispers reached a crescendo, until it was all they could hear. Then, silence. The fog began to lift. The trees parted slightly, revealing a narrow path. A way out. "Go!" Ivy shouted. Without hesitation, they ran. They didn't look back. When they finally reached the picnic spot, everything seemed normal. The families were still there, laughing, eating sandwiches, completely unaware of the horrors the kids had just faced. Zoe dropped to her knees, gasping for air. Her legs were weak, her heart pounding. She looked at Ethan, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at his hand. The mark was gone. But Ivy's hand, her hand was still glowing faint blue. Zoe looked up at Ivy, but Ivy didn't say anything. She just stared at the woods, her eyes distant, lost in thought. Something was still wrong. The rain started softly at first, tapping lightly on the leaves above. It was the kind of sound that seemed soothing, but Zoe could tell it wasn't right. The air was thick, too thick for a normal day in the woods. The trees around them felt different. They were older, gnarled with roots that twisted into strange shapes. The silence between the drops was louder than anything she had ever heard. "Come on," Zoe called to the others, her voice breaking through the thickening fog. "We can't stop now." Ethan, Michael, Ivy, and the others followed her without hesitation. They were deep in the woods now, far past the sign that warned them to turn back. It had been easy to ignore the warning at first, but now, with the rain falling harder, something in the air felt wrong. Zoe felt it in her chest, a tightness, as though the trees themselves were watching her. "The trees here are wrong," Ivy whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Zoe didn't respond. She didn't know how to explain it, but the trees were watching them. There was a sense of something ancient, something angry. The rain whispered louder now, almost like it was calling to them. "Leave. Leave." The voice in the wind carried the message, softer than the thunder but clearer than the rustling leaves. Zoe's heart pounded in her chest. What does it mean? She thought. She knew they had to leave, but they couldn't stop. Not yet. They reached a clearing, and in the middle of it stood the tree. The black tree. It was enormous, towering over the others. Its bark was cracked like old, dry skin. Its roots twisted and curled, gripping the earth like claws. Zoe's breath caught in her throat. "I'm going to climb it," Zoe said, her voice shaky but determined. She approached the tree, her eyes tracing the symbols carved into the bark. "Don't," Ivy warned. "Something's wrong with it." But Zoe was already climbing, her fingers finding their way up the rough surface of the tree. As she reached a low-hanging root, she felt a shiver run down her spine. The tree wasn't just a tree. There was something inside it, something waiting. It was alive in a way that no tree should be. The others followed her one by one, each climbing onto the roots, standing beside Zoe. But Ivy stayed back. She couldn't move closer. She could feel it now, the weight of the tree's presence. Its eyes that weren't really eyes, staring into her. A flash of lightning split the sky above them, followed by a deep echoing boom of thunder. The ground shook beneath their feet. Suddenly the air felt alive with energy. A shadow pulsed with the thunder, and for a moment Zoe thought she saw the tree move. The bark cracked and groaned. Something inside the tree stirred. "Ivy," Zoe whispered, her voice quivering. "I think it's alive." The rain whispered again, louder now. "Leave the roots." The words were a warning, but Zoe didn't understand. She couldn't stop herself. Her hand reached out to touch the bark, brushing against one of the glowing symbols. That's when it happened. Ethan slipped. His hand brushed the glowing symbol, and for a brief moment everything went still. Then the tree groaned loudly, its roots shifting beneath them. The ground trembled. Then Michael was gone. He vanished without a sound, as if the forest had swallowed him whole. There was no scream, no trace. Just the space where he had been. One moment he was standing beside them, and the next he was nothing, just gone. The kids screamed. Panic rose in their chests as they turned to run. But the forest wasn't the same anymore. The trees closed in, their branches reaching down, twisting, bending. The path they had taken was gone. All that remained was a maze of twisted trunks and thorns. The air grew colder and the shadows stretched long across the ground. "Back this way," Ivy shouted, her voice frantic. They ran, but no matter which way they turned, the trees kept moving, twisting, changing. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, and it wasn't letting them go. Zoe clutched Ivy's hand, her breath coming in quick gasps. "I didn't mean to touch it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's okay," Ivy said, but her voice was thin, shaky. She didn't believe it was okay. Neither of them did. Thunder rolled above them, and then silence. Even the birds had stopped chirping. The world was still. It felt wrong. "We need to find shelter," Ethan said, his voice low. His eyes were wide with fear, his body stiff with tension. "We have to..." Suddenly they saw it. A hollow tree. Big enough for all of them to crawl inside. They rushed toward it, hoping for some kind of safety. Inside, it was dark and damp. The smell of wet earth and something else, something burnt, filled the air. They crawled inside and huddled together. The walls of the hollow tree were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Some of them looked like the marks on Ethan's hand. Others resembled teardrops, pulsing slowly as if alive. "What is this place?" Zoe whispered, her voice tight with fear. Ivy leaned closer, studying the symbols. Her breath caught in her throat. She could understand them. The words were old, too old, but they meant something. She spoke softly. "One must return." The symbols began to shift, moving like liquid. They formed new shapes, old words Zoe couldn't understand. But Ivy could. And she saw their names, Zoe's, Ethan's, Michael's, scratched. Out a chill ran down Zoe's spine. The rain whispered that we should leave. Zoe murmured, clutching Ivy's arm. But Michael didn't listen. He touched the tree. What happened to him? The rain outside began to fall harder, and Zoe felt the weight of it. She couldn't explain why, but she knew. She had to leave the forest. They all had to leave. But how? The rain whispered again. Return what was taken. Ethan's eyes went wide. What do you mean? What did we take? Zoe pulled the purple flower from her pocket, the same one she had picked earlier. It was still glowing faintly, but now it felt wrong. It felt like it wasn't hers. She gasped, her fingers trembling. We have to return it. With a final shaky breath, she dropped the flower into the mud. The moment it touched the ground, the forest screamed. Leaves ripped from branches. Roots groaned. The trees shook violently as the wind howled. The forest was alive with rage, but then it stopped. Silence. The fog began to lift, the trees parting just enough to reveal a path. "Go!" Ivy shouted, her voice filled with urgency. They ran, no longer thinking, just running. They broke through, the trees back to the picnic spot. When they emerged, everything was normal. The families were still there, laughing and eating sandwiches. It was as if no time had passed at all. Zoe collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. She looked at Ethan and saw that the mark was gone. But when she turned to Ivy, her hand was still glowing faintly blue. Ivy didn't speak. She just looked back toward the woods. The trees were quiet now, still, watching. That night, as Zoe lay in bed, rain tapping on her window, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions. Had they really escaped? Or was the forest still watching? And, somewhere deep in the night, the rain whispered again, "You left, but not all of you." The rain came again that night. It wasn't a soft patter this time. No, it was heavy, insistent, like it was trying to drown out every other sound. Zoe lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to it fall. Tap, tap, tap. The rain whispered, just as it had before. "You left, but not all of you." Zoe shivered. She pulled the covers tighter around her, but it didn't help. The air felt thick, like the forest was still there, stretching into her room, reaching for her. Her thoughts drifted back to the clearing, to the tree, to Michael's disappearance, to the strange symbols, glowing blue, like they had wanted something from them, something they hadn't given back. Something had changed that day. Zoe knew it. They had escaped, yes, but not entirely. The forest had taken something from them, and it was waiting to get it back. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Ivy. "Meet me by the old oak. I think I understand now." Ivy? Zoe's heart raced. She didn't even hesitate. She grabbed her jacket, pulled it on, and stepped outside. The rain had only grown worse. It felt like the entire world was flooded, but Zoe didn't care. She had to know what Ivy had discovered. She had to understand. The streetlights flickered as she walked, their glow casting long shadows across the wet pavement. She hurried through the neighborhood, her footsteps quiet against the rain-soaked ground. The old oak tree wasn't far. It had always stood there right at the edge of the park, a giant among its kind, even older than the ones in the cursed forest. Zoe had passed it 100 times, never thinking twice about it. Until now. When she arrived, Ivy was already waiting, under its thick branches, her figure barely visible in the mist. The glow from her hand was still there, faint but steady. "You came," Ivy said softly, her voice shaky. "I've been studying the symbols. The forest. It's not finished. With us." Zoe felt her stomach drop. She moved closer, standing next to Ivy, her breath misting in the cold air. "The tree," Ivy continued. "It's a gateway, a place between worlds. The rain, it's the key. The rain brings them here, to our world." Zoe looked at Ivy, not sure if she understood. "You mean the trees are alive, like not just plants?" Ivy nodded. "Yes. They've always been alive. But the storm, the rain, it's different now. It feeds them. It makes them stronger." The wind picked up then, howling through the branches of the old oak. Zoe flinched. "The symbols." Ivy's voice trembled. "They're not just warnings, they're instructions. A curse that we have to break if we don't finish it." The rain whispered again, louder this time. "Return what was taken." Zoe's eyes widened. She had been right. They hadn't returned it. purple flower. The moment it touched the mud, the forest screamed, but it wasn't enough. It hadn't been enough. What do we do? Zoe whispered, her voice breaking. Ivy stepped closer, her eyes full of fear but also determination. We need to go back to the tree. We need to finish what we started. Zoe felt her heart race again. The idea of going back into the forest, where they had barely escaped with their lives, felt impossible. But Ivy was right. They had no choice. They couldn't leave it like this. Let's go, Zoe said, swallowing her fear. They ran, the rain now a constant pounding around them, deafening, as if the storm itself were urging them forward. The wind howled, bending the trees, but they didn't stop. Their feet splashed through the puddles, and their breaths came in short, desperate bursts. By the time they reached the cursed park, the forest was alive with movement. The trees were shifting, creaking, groaning under the weight of the storm. The path they had taken before was gone, swallowed by the growing fog and the twisting roots. But Zoe and Ivy knew the way. They pushed forward, stepping through the mud, ignoring the thorns that scraped at their arms until they reached the clearing. The black tree stood there, unchanged, its dark bark still cracked like old skin. It seemed to breathe in time with the storm, its roots shifting and writhing beneath the earth. The moment Zoe stepped into the clearing, the tree groaned. The air thickened and the whispers grew louder. Return what was taken. I can't, Zoe whispered, her hands trembling. I don't know how. Ivy stepped forward, her hand glowing brighter now. We have to give it back. The flower. We didn't finish it. We didn't return what we took. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the glowing purple flower. It shimmered faintly in the storm's light, pulsing with an eerie glow. The air around them crackled with energy. Michael, Zoe whispered. He's still gone because we didn't finish it. We didn't give it back. The ground trembled beneath them. Zoe could feel the power of the forest, the dark pulse that seemed to echo from the black tree itself. I'll do it, Ivy said, her voice low and steady. She stepped forward, placing the flower gently at the base of the tree. The moment it touched the roots, the ground rumbled. The tree's bark split open, revealing a dark, hollow space inside. A shadow pulsed within, growing larger, stronger. Then, silence. The wind stopped. The rain ceased. The storm cleared. 4E. A moment. Everything was still. The black tree seemed to sigh, its branches lowering slightly as if relieved. The atmosphere in the clearing lightened, the weight lifting from their shoulders. But something was different. A voice, soft but unmistakable, echoed in their minds. You have returned what was taken, but there is always a cost. The tree's bark cracked again and something shifted in the shadows. Zoe and Ivy backed away slowly, watching, afraid to blink. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the darkness was gone. The forest was still. The fog lifted, the trees stopped moving, and the clearing was silent once more. Zoe looked around, confused. The forest no longer felt like a living thing, but something was wrong. It felt empty. We did it, Ivy whispered. But Zoe wasn't sure. She glanced at the ground where the purple flower lay. It had withered completely. The glow had faded. Do you think Michael is... Zoe started to ask, but she couldn't finish. Her words caught in her throat. The rain whispered one final time, faint and far away. Not all things are meant to return. The forest held its breath. And the two girls turned, walking away. When they finally reached the edge of the park, Zoe glanced back one last time. The black tree was gone, leaving only the normal, peaceful woods behind. But somewhere in the distance, she heard the faintest echo of a voice in the rain. You left, but not all of you. Story 4. Black Rain Protocol, Alien Invasion, hidden in plain sight. The small Texas town of Middletown was quiet as usual. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the dusty streets, and the soft rustling of the trees was the only sound that accompanied Ethan's morning walk. But today something was different. At exactly 12 o'clock the day seemed to freeze. The sun, once a golden sphere hanging lazily in the sky, was suddenly overshadowed. Dark clouds began to gather, thick and black, almost as if they were consuming the light itself. The air grew heavier and a strange chill crept through the streets. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks. "Is this some kind of storm?" he muttered under his breath, scanning the sky. But no rain was falling yet. It was the sky itself that looked wrong. The clouds seemed almost alive, swirling in a pattern that didn't make sense. Then something caught his eye, a flicker of red in the sky. He squinted, his pulse quickening as the red grew brighter. Dozens of birds flew overhead, their eyes glowing with an unnatural crimson light. Their feathers shimmered, reflecting an eerie glow against the darkened sky. They circled in perfect formation as if they were searching for something. The air was eerily silent except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant sound of footsteps, and then it happened. A single crow cried out, its voice unnaturally sharp. It was as though the crow was calling for others. Soon, more followed, each adding their voice to the growing cacophony. Ethan looked up, horrified, as a massive flock of crows descended upon the town, swirling in an ever-tightening spiral above the rooftops. "What's going on?" he whispered to himself. His heart raced, a sense of dread settling deep within his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a voice behind him. It was Zoe, his neighbor. She stood at the corner of her porch, her face pale with fear. "Ethan, did you see that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What's happening?" Ethan glanced back at the sky, his eyes widening. "I don't know, Zoe. I've never seen anything like it before." As they both stared at the birds, the sky darkened even further, as though the clouds themselves were pushing down on them. The temperature dropped and the wind began to howl, causing the trees to sway and groan. The distant sound of thunder rumbled in the sky, but there was no lightning, no storm. The air smelled strange, damp, metallic, like the calm before a tornado. Zoe stepped closer to Ethan, her eyes darting nervously from the sky to the street below. Then something else happened. The rain began to fall, but it wasn't the typical soft rain. No, this rain felt different. It was heavy, almost oppressive. And as the droplets hit the ground, they sounded strange. Ethan strained his ears, hearing a faint whispering. He looked at Zoe, her face frozen in terror, her eyes wide. "The rain," Ethan murmured. It's whispering." Zoe's voice quivered. "What do you mean whispering?" Ethan wasn't sure how to explain it, but he could hear it now. Amidst the rustling of the trees and the sound of the crows, there was a faint murmur, like words spoken too softly to be understood. The rain whispered, as if sharing some dark secret with the world. "Something's not right here," Ethan said, his voice low. "We need to get inside." But before they could move, a new sound filled the air. It wasn't the cawing of crows or the whispering rain. This was something deeper, something more terrifying. From behind the dark clouds, shapes began to emerge. They were shadows, moving within the thick, swirling darkness. These weren't birds. These were something else. Something alive. Zoe gasped, stumbling back. "Ethan, look. What are those?" Ethan's stomach churned as he stared up at the dark figures. They were flickering in and out of view, like ghosts trapped within the storm. But they weren't like any ghosts he had ever seen before. They seemed to pulse with the thunder, their outlines shifting, stretching, merging into one another, as if they were made of the very darkness itself. The rain continued to fall, each droplet tapping the ground in a rhythm that was too deliberate, too purposeful. The whispers grew louder. The wind began to howl again, and this time it felt as though the very air around them was alive, pressing in from all sides. Without a word, Ethan grabbed Zoe's arm and pulled her inside the house. As they stepped through the door, the first of the crows smashed against the window with a loud crash, sending a spray of glass across the floor. Inside, the world felt off. The air was thick with tension. The walls seemed to pulse with the strange energy that had overtaken the town. Ethan could hear the whispering rain, even though they were indoors now. The sound of thunder echoed through the house, shaking the very foundation. Zoe's breath was shaky. "What's happening to us, Ethan? This isn't just a storm, is it?" Ethan didn't know how to answer her. He wasn't even sure he believed what was happening. But one thing was clear. This was no ordinary weather, and it wasn't just a freak storm. Then came the knock on the door, a loud, insistent bang that echoed through the house. Ethan and Zoe exchanged a look of confusion and fear. Who could possibly be outside in a storm like this? Who would dare? Ethan slowly moved toward the door, every step feeling heavier than the last. When he opened it, there was no one there. The porch was empty, but the strange energy still lingered thick in the air. "Is it over?" Zoe whispered, still looking out the window. But Ethan shook his head. "I don't think so. It's only just begun." Suddenly, a flicker of light caught Ethan's eye. It wasn't the usual glow from a streetlight or a car passing by. This was something different, flickering, erratic, almost as if it was searching for something. "What is that?" Zoe asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "I don't know, but I don't think it's good." The strange light danced in the distance, growing brighter and brighter until it seemed to fill the sky. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't any natural light. And it wasn't from any earthly source. As the light continued to pulse, the sky above them seemed to crack open. Something was moving up there, something vast and ancient, and whatever it wasn't human. The rain whispered louder now, its words becoming clearer, more urgent. Zoe clutched Ethan's arm. "What are we supposed to do?" Ethan didn't have an answer. The darkness had come, and with it, the unknown. Whatever was out there, it was watching them, waiting. And the storm, the rain, the crows, the shadows, was just the beginning. The house was unnaturally still. The air hung heavy with tension, and the world outside had become a nightmare of darkness and whispering rain. Ethan's heart was pounding in his chest, his thoughts racing. He had barely processed what was happening outside, and yet he could already feel it, the presence that had taken over their town. The rain continued to fall, but now it was no longer just a random storm. It was almost like the rain had a voice that was trying to tell them something they weren't sure they wanted to know. The whispering grew louder, almost as if it was coming from inside the walls. Ethan could feel his skin crawl, the hairs on his neck standing on end. It was as though the rain was alive in a way that was foreign and terrifying. "Do you hear that?" Zoe asked, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded slowly, not sure how to explain the eerie sound. "It's the rain. It's different. It's not normal." Zoe took a deep breath and moved closer to the window, her eyes wide. "I don't think it's just the rain. I think something's out there watching us, watching everyone." Ethan joined her at the window, his gaze shifting from the darkened sky to the empty streets below. The wind was growing stronger now, and the crows were still flying in strange formations. Their eyes, those red glowing eyes, seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. And then he saw it. The shadow moved. It was faint at first, but it was there. The shape flickered in and out of view just beyond the reach of the streetlights. It was large, moving with an unnatural fluidity, as though it was part of the darkness itself. Zoe gasped, her hand clutching Ethan's arm. "What was that?" "I don't know," Ethan whispered, "but it's not alone." More shapes began to emerge from the darkened streets. They weren't human, and they weren't like anything Ethan had ever seen before. These shadows were tall, thin, and distorted. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as if they didn't quite belong in the world they were in. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door shattered the silence. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Who could be out there, in the middle of all this? He turned to Zoe, who looked just as confused and terrified as he felt. "Don't answer it," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible. But Ethan couldn't ignore the knock. It was too insistent, too urgent. He cautiously moved toward the door, every step feeling heavier than the last. As his hand reached for the doorknob, the rain outside began to fall harder, its whispers growing louder, more frantic. The shadows outside seemed to move closer, gathering near the window as though waiting for him to open the door. Ethan hesitated. Was this some kind of test? Were they being watched? And if they opened the door, what would they find? The knock came again, louder this time. He turned the knob and slowly opened the door, half expecting to find nothing. But when the door creaked open, the porch was empty. The storm raged on, but there was no sign of anyone, just the eerie, unnatural quiet that had taken over the town. As he stared out into the darkness, something caught his eye. The light. The strange light that had been flickering in the distance was now much closer. It pulsed in time with the rain, and for a moment it almost seemed like the light was alive. Alive in a way that shouldn't be possible. Zoe stepped beside him, her voice shaking. "What is that light, Ethan?" "I don't know, but it's like it's calling us," Ethan said, his voice low, almost fearful. "We need to find out what it is." But before he could say anything else, the light flickered again. This time it was so bright it almost blinded him. For a split second he thought he saw something within the light, something moving. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the way they understood life. It was something else. "I think it's coming from above," Zoe said, her voice cracking as she pointed toward the sky. Ethan looked up, his breath catching in his throat. The sky was darker now, almost black. The clouds had thickened, swirling in an unnatural pattern. It was as if the entire atmosphere was being sucked into the storm, a massive whirlpool of chaos. The rain fell harder now, but the whispers in it had changed. They weren't just random murmurs anymore. They were forming words Ethan couldn't quite understand, but they sounded urgent, desperate. "Do you hear it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zoe nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "It's like it's trying to communicate with us." Suddenly, the shadowy figures that had been lurking outside the window moved again, but this time they weren't just standing still. They were walking, no, moving closer to the house. Their long, thin limbs twisted in impossible ways, their faces obscured by the shadows. But Ethan could feel their gaze burning into him through the darkness. "What do they want?" Zoe asked, her voice cracking with panic. "Why are they here?" Ethan didn't have an answer. All he knew was that they couldn't stay here, not with whatever was watching them. He turned to Zoe, his eyes filled with determination. "We need to leave. Now." Zoe didn't argue. She grabbed her jacket and they quickly ran out the back door into the yard. The rain fell relentlessly, but they didn't stop. They ran toward the woods that bordered the town, hoping that they could escape the shadows that had begun to close in on them. As they ran, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. The words were becoming clearer now. "You cannot run. You are already ours." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. What does it mean? What do they want with us? But Zoe didn't answer. She was too focused on getting away, on finding safety in the forest. Ethan didn't know what was worse, the whispers or the shadows following them just beyond the reach of the trees. And then, something happened that made his blood run cold. The ground beneath their feet shifted. It wasn't an earthquake, it was something else. The earth was moving as though the very fabric of reality was being twisted. The rain whispered louder now. The time has come. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with tension, as though the storm was waiting to return, even more powerful than before. Ethan and Zoe had run through the woods for what felt like hours, but the shadows were still with them, just out of sight, always watching. The whispers in the air were growing louder, more urgent. Ethan could feel them like tiny, sharp needles pricking at his skin. He couldn't make out the words, but they seemed to come from all directions. The very trees themselves felt alive, their branches twisting and turning like skeletal fingers, reaching for them. "Ethan," Zoe whispered, her voice shaking. "Do you hear it? It's like they're calling us." Ethan nodded grimly, his gaze darting from tree to tree, trying to make sense of the feeling that something was closing in on them. The woods were dense, dark, and silent except for the whispers that seemed to echo in the very air. And then the ground beneath them began to shift again. This time, it wasn't just the earth moving. The entire forest seemed to tremble, as though the land itself was reacting to something. The trees creaked, the air buzzed with static, and the soil beneath their feet began to crack. Ethan grabbed Zoe's arm, pulling her back as the ground opened up before them. "Something's wrong," Zoe gasped. "We need to get out of here." But it was too late. The shadows that had been following them all this time emerged from the ground itself, rising up like smoke taking shape. They were tall, thin figures, their outlines flickering in and out of existence, their faces hidden in the darkness. But Ethan could feel their eyes on him, cold and unblinking. They were here. They had found them. Zoe stumbled back in fear, her breath coming in short gasps. "What are they? What do they want with us?" Ethan didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear. The invasion had begun. And they were just the beginning. The shadows circled around them, moving with unnatural fluidity, their forms stretching and shrinking as if they were made of something beyond flesh and bone. They spoke in voices that were more felt than heard, low and resonant like the hum of the earth itself. "You cannot escape." The words filled the air, wrapping around Ethan and Zoe like chains. They were everywhere, around them, through them, above them. The whispers in the rain had turned into a chorus of voices speaking in a language that Ethan couldn't understand. But the meaning was clear. "You will be ours." Zoe clutched Ethan's arm, her voice frantic. "What do they want with us? Why are they here?" "I don't know," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. He looked around, trying to find some way out, but the shadows were closing in, their forms stretching longer with each passing second. He could feel the weight of their presence pressing in from all sides. Suddenly the ground trembled again, more violently this time. The earth cracked open, and from the chasm below, a brilliant, blinding light burst forth. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering like fire caught in the wind. Ethan and Zoe shielded their eyes from the blinding light, but it didn't burn. It was welcoming, almost as if it was calling them. Slowly, cautiously, Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing. The shadows seemed to retreat, shrinking back into the earth as the light grew brighter. "Do you see that?" Zoe whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded, his eyes wide. "I think it's trying to show us something." The light pulsed once more, and with it, a vision appeared. For a moment it felt as though the entire world had stopped. Time seemed to stretch as if they were caught in some endless moment. Ethan could feel his breath catch in his chest as the vision unfolded before them. They were no longer in the woods. They were somewhere else. Somewhere far from the world. They knew. The sky was dark, filled with swirling clouds of purple and black. The ground beneath their feet was cracked and desolate, a barren wasteland. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and then they saw it. A massive structure towering above them, its surface smooth and metallic, as if it had been grown rather than built. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Alien, strange, and ominous. The structure seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, sending ripples through the air, distorting reality around it. "This is where we came from," the voice echoed through Ethan's mind, low and rumbling like the growl of some ancient creature. "This is our home." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as the vision shifted, showing him something else. The shadows. They weren't just shadows. They were beings from another world. Creatures that had come through the rift in the fabric of reality itself. They were alien, made of darkness and light, their bodies shifting like liquid. "We are the architects of the storm. The rain speaks our will. The crows are our eyes. The earth trembles at our command." The vision flickered and the light dimmed. Ethan stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Zoe was beside him, her face pale with terror. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "What did we just see?" Ethan didn't know how to explain it. The vision had been too much, too overwhelming. But one thing was clear. These creatures were not from this world. They were invaders, and they had come to conquer, to reshape reality itself. "Their home is here," Ethan said softly, his voice shaking. "This is where they're from. This is what they want." Zoe's eyes were wide with horror. "But why us? Why the town?" "I don't know," Ethan replied, his mind racing. "But we can't stay here. We need to warn the others." But as he turned to leave, the ground shifted once more and the shadows closed in around them. The whispering had returned, louder now, more urgent. "You cannot escape. The time has come." The shadows reached out, their long, thin limbs stretching toward them. Ethan and Zoe backed away, fear taking hold. They were trapped. There was nowhere left to run. And then, just as the shadows were about to close in, the light flared again, brighter than ever before. The shadows screamed, their forms distorting and writhing as they were pushed back by the force of the light. "You will serve us." And then, the light faded. The forest was silent again. The light was gone. The storm had subsided, but the darkness remained, thick and suffocating. Ethan could feel it in his bones, pressing in from all sides, a silent force that surrounded him and Zoe. The whispers, the cold eyes of the shadows. They had all faded, but they hadn't gone. They were waiting. "We can't stay here," Zoe whispered, her voice trembling. She was clinging to Ethan's arm, looking over her shoulder, as if expecting the shadows to pounce at any moment. Ethan nodded grimly, his mind racing. They had seen the truth in the light. Those beings, those invaders, were not just a threat to their town. They were after something much greater, the entire world. And the storm, the rain, the crows, all of it was part of a larger plan, an invasion that had only just begun. But there was something more, something darker, more insidious that Ethan couldn't shake off. The vision had shown him their intentions, but it had also shown him their power. The power to twist reality itself, to bend the fabric of time and space. The light wasn't just a guide, it was a warning. The rain whispered again, louder now. "The end is near." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The message was clear. They were running out of time. But what could they do? How could they fight something that was so much bigger than them? Suddenly Zoe froze. Her eyes widened in terror as she looked into the distance. Ethan followed her gaze, his blood running cold. A massive shape appeared on the horizon. It was rising from the earth, like a monstrous titan breaking free from the ground. The structure that had appeared in the vision, the one they had seen in the light, was real. And it was here. The black metal surface gleamed under the dim sky, towering over the trees. It pulsed with an unnatural energy, sending ripples through the air, distorting everything around it. And standing before it were the shadows. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. The invasion had begun in full force. "Ethan," Zoe said softly, her voice breaking. "We can't stop this. It's too big." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was frozen, staring at the dark monolith before him. It felt like the very earth itself was bending around it, as if the world was about to be consumed. But then, the rain whispered again, louder than ever. "The final choice is yours." Ethan's mind raced. What did that mean? What was the rain trying to tell him? Without warning, a figure stepped out from the shadows. A tall, dark shape, its form flickering like smoke, shifting in and out of existence. Its eyes, red, glowing, unblinking, locked onto Ethan with an intensity that made him flinch. "You have seen the truth," the figure said, its voice low and rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. "You cannot hide from what is coming. You cannot fight it. You are not strong enough." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The figure's eyes narrowed. "You are the key, the one who can choose. The choice will be yours. Whether you let us reshape this world, or whether you perish with it." Zoe looked at Ethan, her face pale with fear. "What does it mean? What choice?" Ethan took a step forward, trying to ignore the rising dread in his chest. "What do we have to do? What do you want from us?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it stepped aside, gesturing toward the monolith in the distance. "This is the beginning, the last stage of the invasion. The structure will open the gateway to our world. The storm, the crows, the rain, all of it was part of the preparation. The town will be the first to fall, but the entire world will follow." Ethan's mind was reeling. It didn't make sense. How could they stop something so immense, so incomprehensible? "There is only one way to stop it," the figure said, its voice lowering to a whisper. "But it will come at a price. You must sacrifice what is most dear to you. The choice is yours." The ground trembled again, and the structure in the distance pulsed with a bright, unnatural light. Ethan could feel the energy in the air. It was too powerful, too overwhelming. They were out of time. The final decision had to be made, and it had to be made now. Zoe grabbed his arm, her fingers trembling. "Ethan, what do we do? What is the price?" The figure turned away, its form dissolving into the shadows. "You will know when the time comes. The choice will be made. And when it is, you will see the true cost of survival." Ethan felt his breath catch in his chest. What was the true cost of survival? Was it worth it? "Let's go," Zoe said urgently, her grip tightening on his arm. "We have to warn the others. We can't just let this happen." Ethan nodded, but as they turned to run, something stopped him. A flicker of movement caught his eye, just beyond the trees. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Zoe," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Look." A figure emerged from the woods. A man. But not just any man. This man was different. His eyes were dark, like the shadows themselves, and his face was pale, drained of all color. But it was the way he moved that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. Too fluid, too unnatural. The man took a step toward them, his smile wide, almost mocking. "It's too late," he said, his voice cold and hollow. "The invasion has already begun. There is no stopping it now." Ethan felt the weight of those words pressed down on him. The man, this creature, was one of them. He had come to ensure that the invasion succeeded. No, Zoe whispered, her voice shaking. We can't let this happen. Ethan clenched his fists. He knew what he had to do. There was only one way to stop this madness, but it was a choice he wasn't ready to make. And yet the shadows around them grew stronger, and the whispers in the rain were louder now, pressing him toward the inevitable conclusion. He turned to Zoe. I'm sorry, he said softly, and with one last glance at the towering structure in the distance, he ran into the darkness. Story 5. The Forbidden Creation. The rain whispered through the trees outside the lab, tapping against the windows like a nervous hand. Inside, the sterile air was thick with anticipation. The hum of machines filled the room as the lights flickered. Above, Dr. Voss stood at the observation window, her eyes fixed on the incubator in front of her. Inside, the small form of Kyle slept, unaware of the world that would soon change around him. Kyle was not like other children. He never had been. He had been created, not born in the traditional sense. His genetic code was a patchwork of human and animal DNA, a secret project designed to push the boundaries of science beyond anything known to mankind. He was the first, the prototype. Dr. Voss had spent years working on this experiment. Her eyes were the only thing in the room not illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights. They were a dark shade of brown filled with a mixture of pride and unease. Kyle was her greatest achievement, but she couldn't help but wonder if it was a creation she would come to regret. At first, the experiment had seemed simple. Combine human intelligence with the raw power of animals like wolves and bats. Animals with heightened senses, speed, and agility. Kyle's hearing was beyond anything a normal human could imagine. He could hear whispers from miles away, the rustle of leaves long before the wind even stirred them. His brain was like a supercomputer, capable of processing information at a speed that would make most of the world's most brilliant minds blush with envy. But there was more, something darker. As Kyle grew, subtle changes began to emerge. The skin around his ears was more sensitive, his eyes began to glow faintly in the dark, and his teeth sharpened. Dr. Voss had brushed off these oddities at first. After all, he was a product of genetic manipulation. Such things were to be expected, weren't they? But then one evening something happened that she couldn't ignore. Kyle had just turned 16. The sun was setting when the first transformation took place. It began as a low hum in his body, a vibration that seemed to travel from his chest all the way to his fingertips. He had collapsed onto the floor of his room, writhing in pain. Dr. Voss rushed in, heart pounding. She had always known this day would come, but the reality of it was far more terrifying than she had ever imagined. His skin began to shift, becoming translucent, like something in between man and creature. His eyes, once brown like hers, now shone with an eerie, unnatural glow. His heartbeat sped up, pulsing in time with the changes coursing through his body. His mouth opened in a silent scream, his canines elongating, becoming sharp and deadly. He was no longer the child she had raised. He had become something else entirely. Dr. Voss knelt beside him, her breath shallow. Kyle, her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile reality of this moment. Kyle's breathing slowed. He lay on the floor, panting, trying to regain control of himself. The darkness in his eyes faded, but the transformation remained. He looked up at his mother with a mixture of confusion and fear. I don't understand, he whispered. What's happening to me? Dr. Voss stood up, trembling. She had prepared herself for this moment. She had studied the effects, predicted them even, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight of her son, her creation, becoming something unnatural. "You're changing," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You were never meant to be just human." He stood shakily, his newfound strength evident in the way his limbs moved faster, stronger than any human's. But it was the eyes that unnerved Dr. Voss the most. They glowed now, like molten gold, and they pierced through her, as if they could see straight into her soul. "It's not just the body," she whispered to herself. "It's your mind too. It's evolving." Kyle's gaze shifted toward the window. He could hear the faintest sound of movement outside the lab. Soft footsteps on wet grass, the flutter of wings in the distance. His hearing was sharper than ever, and with it came an awareness of the world around him. Every sound, every vibration, every shift in the air. "I have to go," Kyle said suddenly, his voice filled with urgency. "I need to get out of here." "No," Dr. Voss said quickly, stepping in front of him. "You can't. It's not safe. You don't understand." "I do," Kyle cut her off. "I understand more than you think. I hear everything. I feel everything. And if I stay, I'll lose control. You've created something dangerous. I can't let anyone see me like this." Dr. Voss's heart sank as she realized what he meant. The last thing she wanted was for her son, her creation, to be discovered by the outside world. If anyone knew what she had done, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Please, Kyle," she begged. "Stay. I can help you. I'll find a way to fix this." Kyle shook his head, his eyes distant. "I'm not the one who needs fixing. You are, Dr. Voss. You've made me into a monster." And with that, he turned and fled into the night, vanishing into the darkness of the surrounding forest. The rain whispered through the trees again, this time with a sense of finality. It wasn't just a storm anymore. It was a warning. Kyle had left, but his secret, his curse, was only just beginning. As he disappeared into the shadows, Dr. Voss knew that the world would soon know the truth of what she had created. The forbidden creation that had been born in secrecy was now free, and there was no telling what the future would hold. The rain whispered again, its soft patter tapping against the window pane like tiny, anxious fingers. The night outside was thick with shadows, the kind that seemed to stretch forever, hiding secrets in the dark. Kyle moved quietly through the woods, his heart racing faster than it should. The transformation had taken him by surprise. He hadn't expected it to be so complete. As his bare feet sank into the moist earth, he could feel every vibration, every pulse of life around him. The trees whispered their stories. The leaves trembled as the wind shifted, and in the distance the soft rustle of a rabbit scampering across the underbrush made his senses sharpen to an unnatural degree. His body was different now, entirely different. He could feel the raw power in his limbs, the sharpness of his senses, and the strange metallic taste of the air as it passed over his skin. He could hear the beating of his heart, pounding in his chest, but it was slower now, more deliberate, almost like it was a rhythm he could control. But there was more. The transformation was not just physical. It was as if something deep inside him had awakened, something primal, something wild. He stopped near the edge of a small clearing and stared up at the moon. It was full tonight, casting pale light across the landscape, making the shadows dance. The full moon had always been a symbol of change, of hidden truths coming to light. For Kyle, it was a reminder of what he was becoming. His skin still glowed faintly in the dark, almost translucent, and his eyes shone with an eerie golden light. He didn't look like the boy he had once been. He didn't look human anymore. In the distance, he heard the sounds of a small group of deer grazing. The subtle crunch of grass underfoot, the faint snort of one of them sensing danger, made Kyle's senses fire into overdrive. He crouched low to the ground, moving silently, his muscles rippling beneath his skin as he tracked the movement of the animals. Kyle had never been this aware before, never so in tune with the world around him. It was as if every movement, every sound, every breath could be felt in the core of his being, and with it came an urge, a need to chase, to hunt. He didn't understand it. He had never wanted to hurt anyone, but there was something inside him now that felt different. The craving was not just for food, but for power, for dominance. He could feel the heat of the hunt rising in him, his body moving faster than he ever thought possible. He shook his head. No, this was not him. This was the creature that the experiment had made. But how could he control it? How could he stop? The need to run, to chase, to feel that rush of strength? Stop, he whispered to himself, but the voice in his head only seemed to grow louder. It was like an itch he couldn't scratch, a hunger that gnawed at him from the inside. The deer in front of him had not noticed him yet. They were so close now, too close. In one swift, fluid motion, Kyle pounced. His legs pushed off the ground with unnatural force, sending him soaring through the air. His hands stretched out, claws digging into the soft flesh of the first deer. He reached. It let out a squeal, but it was too late. Kyle's teeth sank into its neck, the rush of power flooding through him. It was over in seconds. Breathing heavily, Kyle stood over the deer, staring at the lifeless body. He was panting, his body shaking with the aftershocks of the hunt. He had done it. He had taken life. He felt disgusted. His heart hammered in his chest, and the golden glow in his eyes flickered. What had he become? Was this the true cost of his creation? The beast inside him. How long could he control it before it took over completely? The wind shifted, and Kyle's heightened senses picked up a faint sound. Footsteps, not far away. He quickly turned, crouching low, blending into the shadows. The footsteps grew louder, coming closer. Kyle's muscles tensed, ready to move if necessary. But the figure that emerged from the trees wasn't an animal, nor was it a threat. It was a woman, and she was walking alone through the forest. Dr. Voss. Kyle's heart skipped a beat. She shouldn't be here. She couldn't see him like this, but he couldn't help himself. His eyes locked onto her, drawn to her presence as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. He needed to know what she was doing here. Was she looking for him, Kyle? She called softly, her voice trembling in the quiet of the night. He froze. She knew. He couldn't hide anymore. She stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the spot where he had just been. She must have sensed him. The way the air shifted, the way the animals moved. She was too intelligent not to notice. "Please come out," she said, her voice breaking. "I know you're here." Kyle took a deep breath, his eyes flickering with the golden light that filled the clearing. He knew there was no going back. She would never see him as the boy she had raised anymore. He wasn't that boy. Not now. With a low growl, he stepped from the shadows, his form emerging in the moonlight. Dr. Voss gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she took a step back. "Kyle." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What have I done?" Kyle stood tall, towering over her now, his golden eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment he saw a flicker of recognition. She was still his mother, but she was also the one who had created him, who had forced him into this new life. He felt anger rising inside him, but he pushed it down, trying to control the beast that threatened to claw its way out. "I didn't ask for this," he growled, his voice rough, filled with a pain he couldn't express. Dr. Voss reached out a trembling hand, but she couldn't touch him. She couldn't reach him anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." Kyle shook his head, turning away from her. "It's too late for apologies. I'm not the same person I was, and you can't fix me." The wind whispered again, carrying a chill through the trees. Kyle turned and fled, disappearing into the night once more. Dr. Voss stood frozen, staring after him, the weight of her creation's curse heavy in the air. The rain whispered again, its soft drumming against the forest leaves. Kyle moved silently, through the trees, his senses alert to every sound, every vibration around him. The world had never felt so vivid. Every leaf, every rustle of the wind, every drop of water falling from the branches was a part of him. He could hear everything, smell everything, and feel everything with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. It was a gift, and yet it felt like a curse. Kyle had spent the past few weeks hiding in the forest, keeping his distance from everyone, including Dr. Voss. He couldn't bring himself to face her again, not after what had happened, not after he had seen the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had once felt for himself. But the loneliness gnawed at him. The silence of the forest was deafening, even though the sounds of nature surrounded him. His mind raced, his thoughts too loud, too chaotic. He had always felt different, but now he truly understood what it meant to be alone. The transformation had become more frequent. It no longer happened only when the sun set. Now, he could feel it stirring within him at any moment, a restless energy that pulsed through his veins. His body craved the change. It was as though the beast within him was always awake, always waiting for the right moment to take control. Kyle clenched his fists, feeling the claws extend slightly from his fingertips. He could taste the air around him, like the earth, like the animals, like something primal. His skin prickled with the need to run, to hunt. He couldn't deny it anymore. There was a part of him buried deep inside that relished the hunt, the thrill of chasing, of overpowering something weaker. It was intoxicating. And every night, it became harder to resist. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of something unfamiliar. He froze, his body going still, his senses zeroing in on the source. His golden eyes glowed as he scanned the forest, focusing on the subtle movements in the underbrush. Something, or someone, was out there. He wasn't alone. The trees rustled again, and Kyle moved swiftly, his feet barely making a sound on the wet ground. He crouched low, his body blending into the shadows, his breath steady. His heart raced, not out of fear but out of anticipation. This was the moment. This was what he had been waiting for. A figure stepped into the clearing. It was a man. His face was obscured by the hood of a dark cloak, but Kyle could hear the slow, measured steps as the man approached. He could smell the faint trace of tobacco, a hint of leather, and something else, something cold and unnatural. A chill ran down his spine. This man wasn't just a hunter. He was something else. The man paused in the center of the clearing, looking around as though he knew something was watching him. Kyle's muscles tensed, ready to spring into action. He couldn't explain why, but something told him that this man was dangerous. "Come out, boy," the man called, his voice low but carrying through the trees. "I know you're out there." Kyle's lips curled back slightly, revealing the sharpness of his teeth. He didn't move. He didn't need to. He could wait. He was patient. "I know what you are," the man continued, his tone growing more insistent. "And I'm not here to harm you, I'm here to help." Kyle's mind raced. Help? Who was this man? And how did he know what he was? He had kept his secret well, never letting anyone see him for what he truly was. Never letting anyone see the monster inside him. The man stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. He was looking directly at Kyle now, his eyes narrowing as if trying to pierce the darkness. "You don't have to hide anymore," the man said softly. "There's a place for you. A place where you can learn to control what's happening to you." Kyle felt a sudden sharp spike of anger. Who did this man think he was? He was not some experiment to be fixed. He wasn't some tool to be controlled. He was not a monster. Without warning, Kyle lunged from his hiding place, his body moving with the speed and grace of a predator. He closed the distance between them in an instant, his claws extending as he swiped at the man. The man barely had time to react. With lightning-fast reflexes, he sidestepped Kyle's attack and grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. The pain shot through Kyle's body, but he gritted his teeth and fought back, his free hand reaching for the man's throat. But then the man did something unexpected. He spoke a single word, a command that rang out like a whip in the night. Freeze. And, just like that, Kyle's body went still. He could feel the power in the word, in the man's voice. It was as if the command had reached deep inside him, shutting down his will to move. It was the kind of power that Kyle had never experienced before. Like this man had control over him, over everything. The man leaned in, his breath warm against Kyle's ear. "I told you I'm here to help you," he whispered. "But if you resist, I will be forced to take measures you won't like. I don't want to hurt you, but you'll give me no choice if you keep fighting." Kyle's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. This was different from anything he had ever felt before. The man released his grip on Kyle's arm, stepping back to give him space. Kyle staggered, trying to regain control of his body, but the strange paralysis lingered. "I'm not your enemy," the man said, his voice calm but firm. "But I'm not going to let you destroy yourself either." Kyle's mind raced. Who was this man? And why was he here? What did he want with him? Before Kyle could speak, the man took a step back, his hand resting on the hilt of a small device hanging from his belt. "You're not the only one with secrets, boy," the man said cryptically. "And you're not the only one being hunted." The rain whispered softer now, like the gentle murmur of a distant memory. The storm had passed, but the air was thick with tension. Kyle stood motionless in the clearing, his senses alive with the quiet that had replaced the chaos of the night. The man, whoever he was, had given him a choice, but it felt more like a trap. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, heavier than anything he had ever experienced. "Why?" Kyle's voice came out raspy, hoarse from the tension. His body still hummed with the aftershocks of the strange command that had paralyzed him. "Why would you help me?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he simply watched Kyle with calculating eyes, as if trying to decide how much to reveal. His hand rested lightly on the device at his belt, but his posture was relaxed. There was something unsettling about the way he seemed so calm, so sure of himself. "I'm not here to hurt you," the man finally said, his voice low but steady. "I'm here because I know what you are, and what you could become. What you've already become." Kyle's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? I'm just..." He faltered, the words choking him. He wasn't just anything anymore. He wasn't human. He wasn't even sure he could be fixed. The man stepped closer, his boots barely making a sound on the wet ground. "You've been living in the shadows for too long," he said, his voice softer now, almost sympathetic. "You can't keep running forever, Kyle. You were created for a purpose that's far bigger than you realize." Kyle's stomach churned. "Created? By who? What are you talking about?" The man didn't flinch at Kyle's anger. "By people like Dr. Voss, people who wanted to control you, people who thought they could make something better. But they were wrong. They underestimated you. They underestimated what you are." "I don't need their help," Kyle snapped, his claws extending from his fingertips again. He took a step forward, his body brimming with the urge to fight. "I don't need anyone." The man didn't back down, though. "I know you think that, but you're wrong. You're not alone anymore, Kyle. There are others like you, others who have been created by the same people who made you. And they're not hiding in the woods. They're coming for you, they're coming for all of you. The words hit Kyle like a slap. His breath caught in his throat. What do you mean, others? What do they want with me? The man took another step forward, his gaze never leaving Kyle's. They want to control you, Kyle. They want to use you as a weapon. To do that, they need to find you, and they'll stop at nothing to do it. That's why I'm here. Kyle's mind raced. He had never imagined that there could be others like him, that there were more people, more monsters out there, and they were hunting him. You can't trust them, the man continued, his voice almost a whisper now. They'll use you. They'll destroy you if they get the chance. But if you come with me, if you make the right choice, I can protect you. I can help you control what's inside you. Kyle clenched his fists, fighting the surge of emotion that threatened to take over. He wanted to believe the man. He wanted to believe that there was hope, that there was a way out. But he had lived in the darkness for so long that it was hard to imagine anything different. What do I have to do? Kyle asked, his voice barely audible. He didn't know why he asked. He wasn't sure he trusted this stranger, but something in his words had struck a chord. Something deep inside him, the beast, had calmed. The man looked at Kyle for a long moment, his eyes hardening. You have to make a choice. The same choice you've been avoiding all this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, the same one he had worn at his belt. This is a tracker. It will keep you safe, keep them from finding you. But you'll have to leave everything behind, your life, your past, your family. You'll have to choose to embrace who you are. You'll have to accept the truth. Kyle looked down at the device in the man's hand. It was small, sleek, and ominously simple. There was no going back from this. Once he accepted it, once he used it, he would be committing to something he couldn't undo. The wind picked up again, the rain beginning to fall lightly. It was as if nature itself was waiting for Kyle's answer. His heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment that would define his future. Why are you doing this for me? Kyle asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. What do you want from me? The man paused for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, more personal. I'm doing this because I've seen what happens to people like us. I've seen what the world does when it tries to control us. I don't want that for you. I want you to have a choice, to have freedom. Kyle stared at the device in the man's hand. He could feel his pulse quicken, the beast inside him stirring, urging him to take it. But at the same time, there was a voice in the back of his mind, a voice that reminded him of everything he had lost, everything he had fought to protect. I can't stay in this forest forever, Kyle murmured, more to himself than to the man. But can I ever truly be free? The man nodded. You can, but only if you choose to fight for it. Kyle took a deep breath, his eyes meeting the man's. There was fear there, yes. But there was also something else, something like hope. The man held out the tracker, waiting. Kyle hesitated for just a moment longer. Then, with a steady hand, he reached out and took it. The rain whispered around them, and for the first time in his life, Kyle felt like he was making the right choice. But the future was still uncertain. The beast within him still roared, still longed for the hunt. But maybe, just maybe, he could control it. As he turned away, the shadows deepened. The choice had been made. But Kyle knew that his journey was only beginning. And somewhere in the distance, the howl of another creature echoed through the trees. And just like that, the experiment ends. But the darkness, it's only beginning. Smash subscribe, slam that bell, or the next nightmare might claw its way into your feed and linger. Tell us, when Kyle vanished into the forest, do you Think he found freedom? Or did he become a pawn in a game far beyond his control? Drop your truth below. Share this with anyone who still believes safety exists, because it doesn't. This is American Pulse and Paranormal. Sleep tight.